So what I'm going to do is show you a few things on the spine, and then we'll recline, and we'll go through basic series 1, and I'll try to share some anatomy in the flow with you while you're getting a nice practice at the same time. That's what anatomy in the flow, or practical anatomy, applied anatomy, that's what it is in TriYoga, that you get to do flow and then you learn through it, through the flow.
That's beautiful. Nandi, we just did a few of the hip muscles, the adductors and abductors and the flexors and extensors and the rotators. So we just went through that to prepare for your class a little bit.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
Did you talk much about the hip?
No, you just know. I think you can't hear it often enough.
Okay.
It's always good. It just cements in. Yeah.
Yeah. And that reminds me, just, take in what you can and don't just relax with it and don't be concerned. Just enjoy, especially if you don't have much background in anatomy yet. Okay. So I'm going to show you. Okay. I guess I have to make myself bigger too, so I can see myself here. Ah, there I am. Okay. Okay. So here's the spine. This is my companion. Like Charlie has a blanket. Charlie Brown. This is spiny. So we're focusing today on basic series 1, which is the Free the Hips series in TriYoga. Series 1, 3, and 5 of basics are Free the Hips. And series 2 and 4 in basics are Free the Spine. And they all include all of it, really, but there's a focus here. And this is the Earth series. So you're on your back, very Earth element. A few things about the spine, since when we lie down, you can refer back to it in your imagination. Okay. There's 2 ways of looking at the hips. One is the anatomic hip, which is here. I'm showing that movement there. And then the other is the pelvis itself. It's sometimes referred to as the hip. So one side of the pelvis is the os-coxal bone, and then this is the ox-coxal bone. We can just call it the coxal bone. So each one is 3 bones that are fused together into one. That was so that the pelvis could grow. There was cartilage at one point, so it could grow. And by the time you're in about your mid-20s, it's completely fused into one bone. But it is made up of the 3 individual bones, even though they're now one. One is the ilium. Okay. The second is the pubic bone. You can see it here. Okay. And the third, I'll turn it around, is the ischium. That's when you hear the word sit bone, that's where you sit. That's part of the ischium. And these are called the ischiotuberosities, where your posterior thigh muscles attach. The large muscles of the back of your thigh, there's 3 of them. Okay, the other thing while you're looking at the back, you can see the spine, cervical spine, 7 vertebrae, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar. Okay, I'll turn to the side so you can see the natural alignment. It goes in here, lordosis, goes out here, kyphosis, in here, lordosis. This is if you're lying on your back. There'll be space under your neck. Your head will be on the ground or a pillow. The thoracic spine will be on the ground. The lumbar will be away from the ground, and your sacrum will be on the ground. Okay. Now the sacrum is very interesting because it's both part of the spine and it's part of the pelvis. So it really links them and it functions with both. Okay. Now the hip joint, well, let me just mention first, the pelvis has to be able to tilt forward and tilt back. To do forward bends, it has to tilt forward, like a seated forward bend. And to do a backward bend, like bridge, it has to tilt back. So this has to move, like say I have my hands right here. It has to, when you're doing a forward bend, it has to move like this, anterior tilt. And when you're doing a backward bend, it has to tilt back, posterior tilt. So what we're doing with all this hip opening, we're freeing the pelvis's ability to move. We're freeing the pelvis's ability to move into forward bends, move into backward bends by developing strength and flexibility in those areas. We're freeing the pelvis's ability to do a lateral tilt like in gate and triangle. Okay. So now we'll look at the anatomic hip. This is the femur, very short ones. Imagine that this is your thigh bone that keeps going down to your knee. Okay. The femur is very interesting because it's got a neck, and then the ball of it, the head, fits into the acetabulum, which is a little socket. So it's called a ball and socket joint, like that. And it allows a great deal of movement. Ball and socket joints, they're not like your elbow just does that and that's it. Doesn't have hardly any movement. But it does make it possible for you to eat. Can you imagine trying to eat without that movement? So the reason everybody's hips are so different, like if you look around your room and you look at people in spider, or you watch people in reclined tree, or leg stretch, or cradle, the twists, or you watch them in extended frog or extended penguin, you watch them in any postures, you're amazed how different everybody looks, because there's a lot of variety in the range of motion of the hip, just by its construction alone. Also by habit, by prior injury, things like that. But some people, this is the neck of the femur. That's the part that's fractured a lot in older people with osteoporosis. But some people have a long, thin neck, and it makes their range of motion bigger because it moves away from the pelvis. If somebody has a short, wide neck of the femur, in the process of moving, it tends to hit the bone itself of the acetabulum, and it limits the range. Also, that socket that the head of the femur fits into, it can be very deep, which tends to be less range of motion, or it can be more shallow. It's still stable, but a little bit less shallow. And there's different angles too. I'm not going to go into all of that, but just know that it's normal for there to be a big range of differences between people. It's very important as teachers that we recognize that. Okay, when you're lying down, once we're lying down, you want to make sure your pubic bone and the little points of the front of the hips are in the same, when we're lying down, in the same horizontal plane, like this. Okay. When you're standing, it's in the same vertical plane. You know where the little points of the front of your hips are? The anterior, superior iliac spines, or the initials ASIS. If you put your hands on your hips and feel that little point with your middle finger, the little point in front, that is this right here. You want that and the pubic bone in the same plane. Otherwise, you tend to be overarched. And when you're in natural alignment, you want a little space behind your low back, but not under your thoracic spine. So I'll mention those different things as we go. So why don't you go ahead, make sure you have your blocks and your tie and your pillows within reaching distance out to side, and that you have plenty of room behind you to bring your arms overhead. It looks like you do. It looks like you have a nice setup for bringing your arms overhead. So I'm going to go back to my mat, and you go ahead and come to your mat. And hopefully you'll still be able to hear me and everything. Dagmar, is everything okay with the sound? Oh. Let me unmute
Yeah.
that.
The sound is good, Nandi. Thank you.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. Keep me posted, okay?
Yes, I keep you posted.
Okay, thank you. So we can start here, unless if you're not reclined already. Have your blocks within reaching distance. Your long tie, you might want to have it clasped closed before you recline. Do you do that? Do you clasp it closed so that you can easily pull on one end and tighten it? It's nice to have it adjustable. Do you all do it that way? And then have your small pillows within reaching distance. To come to knees to chest, inhale, prep to lower. And then you can, in basics, you could have the arms or elbows to ground, hands or elbows to ground to lower. But if people can, you can just come hands on the tibia, the shins, to slowly recline. The knees, feet pull forward as you recline. Knees to chest. In knees to chest, you have full flexion of the hips and of the knees. That means they're fully bent. So say the knees being bent is limited only by the calf muscles and the thigh muscles being together. Unless somebody has an injury or a knee surgery, something like that, they may not be able to do that full flexion of the knee. Full flexion of the hip where the knees are coming in toward the chest. That's flexion of the hips. And again, you might be limited by the body being in the way. We do have different options where the knees can be wide apart or close together. If they're wide apart, the big toes touch. So wide apart, you've added abduction. Exhale, partial recline. Bring the knees and feet closer toward each other. And slowly lower toes, balls of feet, heels to earth. The arms are relaxed to the sides and palms facing up. Om Mudra. Lift your pelvis a little bit from ground, subtly, and lengthen it toward your heels. Reach toward your heels with your sit bones, with your ischial tuberosities. Relax your pelvis back to ground and just make sure the weight's equal on both sides. You can press your arms down lightly and lengthen your upper back in the direction of the head. And again, be sure the weight's equal on both sides best you can. If you have a scoliosis, it might be challenging to get it equal, but do the best you can. And sometimes people with a scoliosis will put like stuff a small like washcloth or sock or something if there's a concavity, like a space in where the scoliosis is. Scoliosis is when the curvature of the spine is lateral, looks like an S shape from the back, or a C shape, depending on what type. So your feet and knees are parallel, about hip distance apart, weight even on the feet. This will ensure that you use the muscles around the hips, knees, ankles, and feet equally. So your aim will be not to let the knees collapse open, and you'll be not strengthening around the joints evenly, and not to let them collapse in either. Let the eyes rest in the inner eye mudra unless you're observing at some point. Bring the focus to natural breath. Expand the breath to complete breath. Here you're creating as much space as you can by expanding your rib cage, and the air will come in from the outside to fill the lungs. Maximum comfortable capacity, and then the rib cage becomes smaller and smaller, the thorax smaller and smaller, abdominal muscles drawing in, pressing up on the diaphragm, releasing as much air as comfortably possible. Continue complete victory breath. Exhale completely. And did you remember to pull the abdominal muscles in at the end? Continue with your complete victory breath. And just a reminder, under your neck is the lordosis. It's concave. And under your lumbar area, concave. Lordosis. It's curved in away from the ground. So there's space there. And notice the little points of your front of your hips, anterior, superior iliac spines, and your pubic bone are in the same horizontal plane. Like if you had a block, it wouldn't tilt up there, and it wouldn't tilt in the other direction, like I'm showing with the block. It's flat there. Okay, make sure your thoracic region is not arched. I'm going to just show what it would look like if you let the thoracic region arch up. Okay, I let the lumbar curve go up into the thoracic area. It shifted my pelvis too. So now I'm going to bring the thoracic area down so the lumbar curve is just below the lumbar area behind the navel. Okay, so make sure you don't let the thoracic take on that lordosis. Exhale completely, partial recline. Inhale, bridge roll 1, roll over the sacrum. Feel the low back press into the earth, the lumbar area. Roll up to just above the waist. That's the lumbar spine that you've rolled up. On the exhale, roll back down to partial recline. You're in natural alignment now. Don't roll down too far because you just want to have the space under your low back, not your thoracics. Inhale, bridge roll 2. Start the same way. Peel 1 vertebra at a time in a wave up off the earth to bridge 2. Knees and shoulders in a diagonal. Feel the strength of the buttock muscle, gluteus maximus. Exhale, roll back down. Partial recline, natural alignment. Knees to chest. Knees come in, hands can be over the shins, or they can stay to ground. So now you have flexion, and you if your knees are in close, you don't have that lumbar curve there. If your knees are further away, you can have the lumbar curve there. So either way. Exhale, partial recline. Continue this kriya. Inhale, bridge roll 1. Exhale, partial recline. Inhale, bridge roll 2. Your own pace. Exhale, partial recline to knees to chest. Be aware of your knees and feet and hips, that they're lined up. You can even bring some of the weight more on the inner foot and feel how it changes the feeling. And then on the next one, as you roll up, bring some weight on the outer foot more. See how it changes the feeling? So you want to make it equal. Next time in bridge 2, hold. So with this series, we don't use blocks. Of course, somebody could if they needed it that day, but the reason for this at the beginning of series 1 is to help warm up and strengthen for all the hip openings. So again, notice how the strength is even around your ankles, feet, knees, and hips. You can vary it a little bit side to side to notice the difference. Buttock muscle is strong to support the lift. And this is just bridge 2 because it's basics and it's at the beginning of the series. You can feel how strengthening it is. Feel the thighs working. Breath flowing. When ready, exhale, roll down. Flexion of the spine, one vertebra at a time, to natural alignment, and knees to chest. Any of the variations of knees to chest. And there's the different options of rocking side to side that gives a stretch to a different place. Like if your knees come further away from your body and your arms are straight, and then you circle to the right, circle the knees in, more flexion as you cross. And then the knees are further away again, less flexion of the hip. And then back the other direction. And notice how you get a different form of relaxation. Some people need that as a massage, and others just like to stay still. So it depends what's needed that day. And back, knees to chest. So usually when there's a backward bend, like a bridge, we follow it with a twist or a forward bend. The knees to chest counts as a forward bend of sorts. Exhale, prep, hip side stretch. Arms come out in T position, feet partial recline. Lengthen the left leg along the ground. Exhale, hip side stretch, asana. Press right foot down, lift hips. Now keep the length in the spine as you turn to the outer hip, knee to the left. Rotate up through the spine to the right. So this is an example where proportions and flexibility really come in to the movement. Some people will have their knee all the way to ground. Other people, if you measured across the front of their pelvis at the widest point, and you measured their femur, the thigh bone, it might actually be shorter. So you can't expect everybody's knee to come to ground. And also, they have different amounts of flexibility. So try to bring the twist up through the spine. So people will feel this stretch in different places. Some will feel it to the back, the extensors of the back. Some will feel it along the pelvis, like maybe the gluteus muscles. Some will feel it along the outside of the thigh, the abductors of the thigh. Again, it will vary, individual differences. The next exhale, unwind, back to the prep, right sole of foot to ground, balance the hips. Inhale, partial recline, left foot in next to right. Lengthen the spine, weight even on both sides. Exhale, knees to chest, arms to side and then over the legs. So apply any of the different side to side or circles or staying still. Knees further apart or close together. So you can have the straight flexion. You can add the abduction with the knees wider apart than the toes. Exhale, other side, prep, hip side stretch, arms T, feet partial recline. Right leg lengthens on the ground. Exhale, hip side stretch, asana. So again, you may need a block or a pillow, something under your knee or foot. And just experiment, see where you can feel the stretch the most. Your left foot can either be, your toes can be tucked behind the knee, they can be in front of the knee or on top of the knee. It will all vary, again, by proportions and what feels right. Can you bring the stretch up into your upper back? You exhale, unwind back to the prep. Inhale, partial recline. Right foot in next to left. Lengthen the spine, natural alignment. Exhale, knees to chest. Exhale, partial recline. Next exhalation, right side, extended partial recline. Lengthen the right leg along the ground. Feel a stretch from hip out through the toes. Create space in the joints. It actually builds strength and flexibility. Keeping the left foot grounded and in good alignment. Hip, knee, ankle, foot lined up. So it's not going to suddenly collapse open or in. Right side, inhale, leg lift. This is plantar flexion of the ankle. It's pointed. You can spread the toes, abduction of the toes, AB. Exhale, press out through the heel, dorsiflexion of the ankle. Toes toward the knee. Hold the knee lightly, heel lightly touches ground. Continue leg lifts. This is flexion of the hip as you lift the leg. And notice you're resisting gravity on the way down. You're not just dropping the leg by gravity. So in this way, you're strengthening on the way down as well as on the way up. This time when you lift the leg, you can either hold it steady or you can interlace the hands behind the thigh to keep the leg steady. So with the ankle rotations, we're going to do one slowly so you can feel it. Try to keep the leg still. We're just going to be moving. It's not really the pure ankle joint. It's several joints other than the ankle joint is just considered to be able to do plantar flexion and dorsiflexion. But there's some other joints under it that allow this full range. So move your foot, keep your heel steady, and move your lateral foot to the right. And notice you get a stretch on the medial aspect of your leg, the inner aspect, and that it takes strength on the right side, on the lateral aspect. Okay, now circle it up and point, hold. And notice you get a stretch on the front, like tibialis anterior. This is the anterior aspect of the leg, anatomic position. And then if you point it enough, you'll feel the calf muscle is working. Okay, and then circle it in. Notice the stretch to the outside, the lateral aspect, the strengthening to the inner medial aspect. And then dorsiflexion again. Press up through the heel strongly. You get a calf stretch and you get strengthening of the front, the tibialis anterior. And continue 2 more rounds and then the other direction. Aiming to get a full circle will bring flexibility and strength all around those joints. Many, many muscles that go up above the knee and below the foot. They strengthen the arch a lot. Okay, relaxing the ankle and foot. So you can take your tie, and if you do it this way, I don't know if you do, but it's a nice way. You bend the knee enough that you put the tie over the foot, and the buckle is within reaching distance out to the side, up by your foot. As smoothly as you can, lift your head and upper back, place it underneath, keeping your breath flow. And then all you have to do is tighten it. Keep your legs straight. So you might have some students that aren't very flexible at all. They might have to come to the wall. and put their legs up a wall with lying on their back. Maybe their sit bones, their pelvis ischial tuberosities will be a little away from the wall and their legs straight up the wall, and they can get a stretch that way. Otherwise, if they're not at least 90 degrees, they're fighting gravity. So make sure your knee is straight. Unless somebody's not very flexible, they might have to bend their knee, that's fine. But if you can, straighten the knee, press up through the heel. And get a strong stretch. We're in pure flexion at this point, where the thigh is lined up in a straight line, flexion of the hip. Feel a strong stretch. That way you'll notice the difference when we add to this. First, you have an option with your left foot. Either you keep a good partial recline type alignment with that left leg, or if you're at least 90 degrees or further overhead, if you do decide to stretch out your left leg, be sure that you keep it lined up, and you might get a stretch to your hip flexors in the front of the left groin that way. It's nice to keep the foot to ground too, though, because it gives you leverage. You press that left foot down and forward without moving it to get a better stretch. So either way, adding abduction. So even just an inch or two of abduction, that means out and away from the midline. So you still have the flexion. In all of these examples, you're still going to have the flexion of the hip because your leg isn't straight on the ground. So you've added abduction. Did it change the stretch? You might even have to tighten the tie a little bit again. It changes the stretch that much. Some tighten, some loosen. So you're getting a stretch to the posterior thigh muscles that attach on the sit bone, the ischial tuberosities. And you might be getting a stretch a little bit more to the lateral one, the biceps femoris, that attaches down below the knee on the lateral aspect. That's the right side in this case with the right leg. And then come back to center, pure flexion, and add adduction, even an inch or two, crossing the midline, adduction. And notice again, you might be getting the stretch to the medial posterior thigh muscle, the back of the thigh, but you might also be getting a stretch to a little bit on the side, the abductors. Same with when you did the other earlier one. Come back to center, and make believe you have a dot on the front, like a red dot on the front of your thigh, and just keep your leg straight in flexion, but just roll it in so the dot faces a little bit inward to the left, like an eye looking to the left. And that's medial rotation of the hip. It should change the stretch. And then come back to center, pure flexion, and now add lateral rotation or external. Lateral rotation is the same as external rotation, and medial rotation is the same as internal. So I don't know which one you've learned. Back to center. And you have the option now to extend the left leg if it isn't already, or to wait. You can bend the knee slightly to release the thigh, stretch it up again. Exhale, tranquility, asana. Relaxing completely, let the legs just totally relax. See if you feel the difference between the sides. On the inhalation, partial recline, bringing right sole of foot into ground. Press it down and forward, that's isometric strengthening. So it's not moving, but it's pressing down and forward. Left one comes in next to it. Lengthen the low back, natural alignment. Exhale, knees to chest. Any of the mudras you can use for strengthening, making more flexible the hands. And of course, they give, all of these things have immense subtle benefits for the subtle body. Exhale, partial recline, toes first, heels last. Exhale, left side, extended partial recline. Inhale to lift left leg, plantar flexion, pointing the foot. Exhale, press out through the heel, dorsiflexion. Just that act of having the ankle in a different position for lifting and lowering strengthens and stretches the front and back to above the knee and to the toes in a different way. You might feel the muscles of the groin as you're lifting the leg, or that are crossing the groin. All the hip flexors cross the groin where the front of the thigh meets the pelvis there, that line, like iliopsoas, pectineus, rectus femoris. There's several hip flexors. Sartorius. When this time when the leg lifts, you can steady it and foot can go to the outside first, ankle rotations, and just focus on, see if you can feel what we discussed on the other side. And when ready, other direction. And sustain leg stretch. See if you can lengthen the exhale to twice the inhale. Add abduction, AB. AB means away from the midline. You can also change the position of the foot, curling it in. That would be inversion. Then back to neutral, and then the other way, eversion. It gives a whole different stretch, especially to the calf, the front of the leg there. Adduction, ADD. When you do adduction, do you feel the stretch on the outside of the hip a little bit to the abductors? That includes the buttock abductors, like gluteus medius and minimus, that are mostly deep to the gluteus maximus. That's the largest muscle in the body, the gluteus maximus. Back to straight flexion, and add the internal rotation. The dot on the front of the thigh rolls in. See how it changes the stretch? And then pure flexion and then external rotation. These are all of the hip. When you talk about a movement, you always give the joint. Back to center. You can release the thigh. Lengthen the leg up again. Exhale, tranquility. Asana. Inhale, partial recline, left foot in first. Exhale, knees to chest. Exhale, partial recline. Next exhale, right knee to chest. But first, the left leg lengthens out along the ground, in line with the hip. Then the right hip comes in. Comes in flexion and a little bit of abduction. So it's a little bit off to the side. So this is an example of one where some people get a tremendous stretch and some people don't, just like all of them. It really varies because they might already be stretched out in this particular way, but they can use arm strength, develop arm strength and even hip strength by bringing it in. And you might feel a strong stretch to the posterior thigh muscles in the back. You might feel a stretch to the anterior thigh muscles like the quadriceps. Now, when we do hip rotations, you start to the outside and you start by keeping the hands interlaced around the shin, doing one circle. And that's so people, if they have a hip injury or something, they can stay with these smaller rotations. So the next time you can either stay with that or release the hands and you have abduction. Lengthen the leg out next to the other leg, cross it over, it's straight at adduction. And circle the knee into flexion, all of the hip. Abduction, lengthen the leg, neck right next to the other leg, bend the knee over. The hip, the buttock might lift a little bit from the ground for the adduction part. So this makes a lot of strength and flexibility around the hip, except for the back, because we're on the ground. And knee comes in, you can either pause, interlacing the hands, or you can just pause without the hands. Continue in the other direction, so it starts with AD, deduction, crossing the midline, crossing the other leg, bend the knee, and continue. Feel the strengthening happening. I mean, the leg is heavy. So there's a lot of strengthening and stretching that happens with this movement. And hold one knee to chest. Reach out through the sit bones reach out through the right sit bone, through the right ischial tuberosity, where the posterior thigh muscles meet or attach. Lengthen in the direction of the left foot and see if it gives you a better stretch. And then exhale, knees to chest. Left knee comes in to meet the right. Exhale, partial recline. Exhale, left side, one knee to chest. So keep the left foot on the ground. Lengthen the right leg first. Create space in those joints. And then left knee comes in. So if you feel a stretch, small hip rotation first, and then some people will stay with that, and maybe it'll differ from one side to the other. Maybe there's an injury on one side, and continue hip rotations. And just see if you can feel different muscles working, some using strength, some getting a stretch. Pause, and then when ready, the other direction. Start with ADD, adduction, crossing the midline with the knee. Exhale, knee to chest, hold. Exhale, knees to chest. Exhale, partial recline. Exhale, right side recline tree. So first lengthen out the left leg in line with the hip. Get a good alignment for it. Then open the right hip, right sole of foot to right inner thigh or knee area. See if you can balance your hips. So this is where you're paying attention to the ASIS bones, the points of the hips, the anterior, superior, iliac spines, and the pubic bone, aiming to be in the same plane. Don't overarch your thoracic area. So if there's any discomfort in that right thigh, if it's too much of a stretch, place something under the right thigh or knee area. And make sure it's only as much as you need, not more. So this will be a stretch for most people to the right thigh, the right hip. This is abduction and external rotation. If the knee's higher from the ground, it also includes flexion. So see where you feel the stretch. Do you feel it in the hip itself, the groin area? Do you feel it in the inner thigh, the abductor muscles, ADD? So wherever you feel it is perfect for you. It might not be the same as what anybody else is feeling. Or it might be the same. Interlace the hands in completion mudra on the hips, right fingers and thumb in front. And before we add the forward salute to reclined extended tree, remember just before ground, the thumbs extend and touch into prana mudra. That's if your hands happen to touch ground. You might need, if you know already that you need a block to rest your hands on back there, or a bolster, you can have it there. Or if you need to separate the hands, it all depends on your flexibility or if you have an injury. Inhale, reclined extended tree, like a forward salute. And just before ground, prana mudra, the thumbs slowly separate and touch. So between the index fingers and the thumbs are fully on the ground or on your cushion. So if somebody has a lot of flexibility in their shoulders in this, it would show up in a posture like mountain, or wall hang. a lot of flexibility there in the shoulders. Their arms might be fully straight with their hands on the ground and the elbows touching ground. Others are less flexible there. They might have their elbows bent. They might have gently draw the elbows toward ground for a stretch. Somebody else might have their hands separated in Om Mudra, either overhead or outside. Somebody might have just one hand overhead because they have an injury on the other side. So there's a lot of variations. You can also extend the fifth fingers and have them touch. And that's another variation of Prana Mudra. So you can press out through your left heel now and then. And if your leg is, like mine is tending to externally rotate, it's tending to fall open. So I can lift it a little bit, lengthen it, and roll it in. Add internal rotation, place it back on the ground, and then just let it relax. And it'll be more in neutral. On the inhalation partial recline, take the big stretch out first. So right sole of the foot comes to ground. Your hands are still behind to ground. Left foot comes in to meet the right. Lengthen the back. Exhale, knees to chest, knees come in. And arms come down in a relaxed way over the shins. Exhale, partial recline. Exhale, left side recline tree. First, lengthen the right leg along the ground. Then left hip opens. Add your props as needed. Sometimes if you happen to have sandbags, some people like to use sandbags. You can balance the hips. Long breath. Interlace the hands, completion mudra, left thumb and fingers in front for left side. Inhale, forward salute, reclined extended tree. Just before ground or prop, dissolve into prana mudra. Any of the variations aim to have a 1-to-2 ratio with the breath, inhale to exhale. Bhumadya mudra, inner eye mudra. Keep the arms as they are. Inhale, partial recline. First, left sole of foot to ground. Isometrically pressing it forward without moving it. Right foot in next to it. Lengthen the back. Exhale, knees to chest. Knees come in, arms come down in a relaxed way over the shins. Exhale, spider. Knees and feet come apart, feet above the knees. So I don't know if you've tried this variation where you put the tie. You can try that since you have that. And you reach up and you take the top part and pull it down. Now usually we say the feet above the knees and the knees toward ground. The tie is good because if somebody has to lift up their whole head and back to be able to reach their feet, they don't have good alignment. So they could either have a bolster under their upper back and head, or they can use the tie. The tie is quite nice in that way. So some people like me, for example, don't get any stretch in this particular position. Most people get a phenomenal stretch. But because of the design of my hips, like what we talked about at the beginning, I actually have to bring my feet out a little bit more toward V-stretch before I get a stretch. So there has to be room for individual variation on these things. Otherwise, you're going to have some people, they're not getting any stretch. Sometimes they don't understand how to do it. You have to help them with the technique. But sometimes they literally cannot get a stretch in that particular position. You might use a lot of arm strength here to bring the knees, thighs down and see where you feel the stretch. Do you feel it in the back of the thigh? Do you feel it in the inner thighs? Because this is a combination of flexion and abduction, but the knees are bent, so that adds a different dimension as well with the knees bent in flexion. So you might get a stretch on the inner thighs, the adductors, like adductor magnus, adductor brevis, adductor longus, gracilis, even pectineus, different adductors, none of which you need to know, but sometimes they're fun if you have anatomy background. You might feel the stretch to the posterior thigh muscles. You might feel in inner hips, buttock. It's going to vary. And the exhale, release the thigh, pass through a knees to chest like position to partial recline. Exhale, right side, half spider. You could lengthen out the left leg first, depending on your flexibility, or you can keep it grounded. Make sure your alignment stays good either way. And right side, half spider. Again, you could use the tie and see where you get the stretch. You can use if you hold on to the outside of your thigh, if you hold on to the outside of your foot with your hand, you can use your elbow on the inside to press it open more to increase the space in the joints. Some people that doesn't work for it. There's so much variation. So if you feel comfortable with it, pay attention if you decide to lengthen your left leg along the ground. See how it changes the stretch. When you exhale to partial recline, release with control. And first the right sole of foot will come to ground. And then the left if you lengthen the leg out. So you always take the big stretch out first. Exhale, knees to chest. Exhale, partial recline. Exhale, left side, half spider, asana. Try to have the weight even on the pelvis. If you can, you still have natural alignment in your lumbar, but some have a challenge with that. That's where the tie might come in over the foot. Like I'm showing, it might help with their alignment. Exhale, partial recline. First, left sole of foot to ground. That is if your right leg is extended. Then right comes in. Exhale, through a knees to chest tight position to spider again. So another variation of spider, you can feel the difference now between the first one and this one. You can put your arms on the inside and go across the thighs from behind, like over the back of the thighs, and reach up and take your ankles or feet. There's a lot of different positions that are possible for your arms. And some will work for one person and not for another, and vice versa. That's why there are so many variations, to match the variations in our hips. Exhale, knees to chest. Exhale, partial recline. Now, some people might have to have their feet on blocks for cradle. Right side, exhale, or prep cradle, bringing right ankle over left thigh. This is a lot of external rotation of the right hip, plus flexion. Now, some people have a lot of external rotation without flexion. Like, for example, if they were stretched out on the ground like tranquility more and tried to do external rotation from there, they might have a lot. But you add the flexion component, where the knee is in closer toward the torso, that's the hip flexion, and external rotation, it changes things. For some people, it really varies. Like some people, when they go into this cradle, you can actually see their thigh rotating outward. Can you, on yourself? Like when you come from partial recline, try it again. Do you feel your right thigh rotating from inner to outer, external rotation? Many people do, but not everybody does. Again, because of that design. How long is their neck of the femur? How deep is their acetabulum, the basin where the head of the femur goes into? What angle does their neck of their femur come into of the joint? So there's variation. Now, some people will stay just like this with their foot to a block or ground. Others can exhale cradle, where the hand comes through the window of the arms, interlacing over the shin. You can use a tie as well. So some people stay in prep cradle. Some people do the full cradle. They could put a tie over the shin and have it instead of the hands if they can't reach. Exhale through the prep, left sole of foot to ground to partial recline. Exhale, knees to chest. Exhale, partial recline. Exhale, left side prep cradle. It's a direct movement. Again, you can stay in prep cradle or exhale cradle asana. Left hand comes through the window of the legs. Interlace the hands over the shin or over the thigh. Some people might not be able to bend their right knee fully. Maybe they had a knee surgery or injury and they can't do that much flexion of the knee. So they might need to have the tie or their hand around the thigh instead. See where you feel the stretch? It might be different than the other side. Most people have asymmetry of every joint to some small extent, and some larger. This is another one that uses arm strength. You can use quite a lot of arm strength to go into your flexibility, but not if it creates discomfort. Some days we might hold a lot longer. Exhale through the prep, right sole of foot to ground to partial recline. Exhale, knees to chest. So we keep our knees in pretty close to the chest for this one. And you can have space on each side. This is a reclined twist side to side. We'll just do a few rounds before sustaining. On the exhale, prep, recline, twist, arms come out from shoulders, T position. Palms facing up, Om Mudra. On the exhale to recline, twist, knees come to the left. You can bend your left elbow so that knees come into your palm. Back to center. You can pause for an inhale between each of these, or you can just have it more continuous with the breath. Exhale, knees go to right. Your hand, it can come to your open hand. And you can go side to side. Eventually your knee, just before ground, will come further out so it's in line with the hip. So you can do the breath exactly as written in the manual, or it can vary a little bit as a variation. Next time the knees come to left, sustain, recline, twist. So keep the knees in close till just before ground or your bolster prop, and then they come out in line with the hip. You can press your left arm down to help press your right shoulder down. The twists all vary where you get the stretch. That's why it's so good to have a variety of twists. This is spinal rotation. You may get a stretch to your thighs, hips, buttocks, back. There's so many possibilities of where you can get this stretch. Try to keep the shoulders grounded, even if you don't bring the knees over as far. Exhale, unwind. And the other side, asana, recline twist. When you turn your head from natural alignment, you can lift it just slightly. Keep the natural alignment turned vertebra by vertebra, so it's still lined up with your spine, and then rest it. When ready, exhale to unwind, back to the prep, and knees to chest. Exhale, partial recline. So for reclined free seat, you may need a bolster for under your feet. How do you know? Let's try it and you can see. Lift heels, balls of feet, toes just a little bit from ground. And your left foot will come in closer toward the pelvis. Feel the opening at the hip, the external rotation happening at the hip. So if your pelvis tilts, like I'm showing, it's not horizontal to ground anymore between the pubic bone and the points of the hips. First, see if you can bring it into natural alignment, just the curve under your low back. If it's too challenging, that's when you put a pillow or block under your feet. And then make sure your curve didn't go up into your thoracic region. It's just under your lumbar. So some days we might hold this quite a long time. On the exhale, keep some strength through your feet, like a feeling of the plantar flexion, like pointing at the ankle. That will bring strength all the way up towards your knees even. And on the exhale, keep the knees wide till they're in line with the hips, and then they come in knees to chest. So place a pillow or bolster there if you feel that you need it based on what happened on the other side and you didn't have it before. And also, if you like to use it for reclined butterfly, the last opening, hip opening, you can place your bolster or blocks or pillow, whatever you use, or nothing. Exhale, partial recline. On the exhale to reclined reclined free seat, lift heels, balls of feet, toes just a little bit. Open the hips, feel the external rotation happening. This time your right foot will be in closer towards your pelvis. Reclined free seat, asana. Check that your ASIS bones, the points of the front of the hips, and your pubic bone are in the same plane. You have a little lumbar curve, and it doesn't go up into your thoracics. It's just behind your navel, that curve in the lordosis. See where you feel a stretch. Is it your inner thighs? Is it around the hips? The next exhale, straight through your foot, plantar flexion, knees to chest. Exhale, partial recline as you're ready. Make sure your back is in a good alignment with what we discussed. Exhale. To exhale to recline butterfly, feel the origin of the movement at the hips. So you can lift your feet just a little bit. Feel how it's an external rotation, an abduction. And if your knees are up off the ground in relation to your hips, it's also some flexion. So see where you feel the stretch now. Is it to the inner thighs, the adductors? So holding reclined butterfly, continue with your complete breath. So you're going to be you can either maintain reclined butterfly for yoga nidra, or at a certain point you can come circle the knees in, knees to chest, and then tranquility. And just relaxing completely after about 3 to 5 breaths with complete victory breath. Continue with natural breath for yoga nidra. The eyes in the inner eye mudra, hands in a mudra, and keep a relaxed focus on breath or mantra. Letting go into the flow of peaceful awareness. When I ring the bell, we'll come up in the way we do to a seated posture. I'll take you through the steps. Returning the breath to complete breath. And consciously returning movement back into the body that ends in knees to chest. From knees to chest, inhale, bring one arm overhead. We'll say right, so you're on the same side. Exhale, roll slowly to that side from the base up. Feet come over first, then knees. Hand to ground in front of the chest, then head rests on the arm. Feel the stillness there. And then as you're ready, pressing up, let the head hang down relaxed. Quarter turn to face forward to a seated posture. Jai Gurudevi.